The next speaker is the General Secretary of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Please welcome Kay Hudson.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. I'd just like to say something about double standards. Obviously, none of us want to see nuclear weapons anywhere in the world. I don't suppose any of us want Iran or any other country now to proliferate nuclear weapons. But the big unsaid point, which needs to be made by us here today, as it's being made by protesters around the world, is that there is already a nuclear weapons state in the Middle East. And that, of course, is Israel. Israel has a massive nuclear arsenal. It's unchallenged by the United States and by the international community. They're allowed to get away with more or less pretending or denying that they have it, but their arsenal is probably larger than the British arsenal itself. But Britain is continuing its relations, its economic relations with Israel. It is not imposing sanctions on Israel in the way that it's imposing sanctions on Iran on the mere suspicion that Iran is developing nuclear weapons. And I think we have to make a very strong point that we cannot any longer put up with these double standards. And we can't put up with those double standards from our own government, which is currently working to increase Britain's own nuclear arsenal by replacing the Trident nuclear weapons system. It's just one piece of hypocrisy, one double standard after another. Now, I'd just like to share with you a message which has been sent for this demonstration from the peace and disarmament movement in Israel, from Sharon Dolev, who's a great anti-nuclear activist within Israel. And you can imagine the kind of persecution which the peace and disarmament movement face over there. And she says, just to say, they've already had 2 demonstrations in Israel against war on Iran. And she says, today from Israel, we are with you in spirit in London. A military attack against Iran will be a crime against Iran, against the region, and even against the Israeli people themselves. Warmongers try to tell us that they can solve a complicated situation with the magic wand of bombs and missiles. But an attack on Iran will only guarantee one thing, and that is a war in the Middle East and tragic, avoidable deaths upon death. Countless hundreds of thousands of deaths will be inevitable. The fear of a nuclear Iran is an obvious one, but it's the same fear we should all feel towards any states possessing nuclear weapons, including the United States, Israel and Britain. Warmongers try to tell us that there is only one solution, and they use fear, our fear, as an agent to further their designs. But there is another solution, a real solution, one that deals with the entire Middle East, including the actual nuclear weapons state, Israel. And she goes on to advocate the creation of a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East, which would include the nuclear disarmament of Israel. And she urges us to join together. She said, it's up to us in Israel to create pressure on the Israeli government for peace, but it's also up to you everywhere to try and create that atmosphere against war, for peace, to allow dialogue and peace and justice to prevail in the Middle East. And I say we should support that call from the Israeli peace and disarmament movement. We must oppose illegal possession of nuclear weapons in the Middle East from Israel and work for a nuclear-free Middle East and a nuclear-free world. Thank you.